The room went silent the moment my father-in-law lifted his glass and said that some people marry up, and some people just marry lucky. And then he looked straight at me and smiled like he had not just gutted me in front of 11 relatives and a table full of candles. My husband did not defend me. He just stared at his plate. My mother-in-law laughed the loud fake laugh she always used when she wanted everyone else to laugh too. And they did. Glasses clinking, napkins dabbing at the corners of amused mouths. While I sat there in the dress I had picked out for 3 hours. Because I wanted this one night, this one holiday to feel like I belonged, I smiled. I always smiled. I said something light about the turkey being perfect and asked who wanted more wine. Because that is what I had trained myself to do for 6 years. Swallow it, smile, pour the wine, keep the peace. Nobody in that room knew that in my purse, folded into a manila envelope, was a document that would end their laughter by morning. Let me back up, because you need to understand what 6 years of being invisible actually costs a woman. Before you understand what I did next. I met my husband when I was 28 and working 2 jobs to finish my accounting certification. Waitressing at night and interning during the day for free. Because that internship was the only door that was going to open for someone like me. No family money, no connections, just a stubborn refusal to quit. His family had money, old money, the kind that gets passed down through trust funds and country club memberships. And a particular way of saying your name that makes you feel like a guest even after you have lived somewhere for years. When we got married, his mother did not come to the wedding fitting. She sent a card instead, a formal one, congratulating us both like we had won a small regional award. I told myself that was just her way. I told myself a lot of things were just their way. I put my own certification on hold for 2 years so I could help him launch his consulting business. Doing the books for free. Sitting up until 2 in the morning fixing spreadsheets he had wrecked. Taking client calls on my lunch break from my actual job so his fledgling company would not look understaffed. $11,000 of my own savings went into that business in year 1 alone. Nobody at that dinner table remembered that. Nobody ever does. What they remembered, what they loved to bring up at every holiday like a running joke that had stopped being funny around year 3, was that I had once worked at a diner. They called it my little waitressing phase, said with a wink, said in front of new guests just to watch my face. I learned to laugh along, because the alternative was making a scene. And making a scene meant being the difficult one, the sensitive one, the one who could not take a joke. That is how it starts. It never starts with something big. It starts with a comment about your shoes. A comment about your accent when you say a certain word. A comment about how surprising it is that you know which fork to use. Then it becomes financial. My husband's father ran the family's investment portfolio. And somewhere around year 3, his mother suggested, so casually, that it would be smarter for all of us to consolidate our savings into the family fund. Better returns, tax advantages, keeping it all in the family. I resisted at first, every instinct in my accountant's brain screaming at me to keep my own accounts separate. But I loved my husband, and I wanted his family to finally see me as one of them, instead of the outsider who married in. So I agreed. And slowly, over 3 years, almost everything we had went into accounts controlled by his father. I told myself this was normal. I told myself trust was supposed to feel uncomfortable sometimes. What I did not know, what I would not discover until 11 months before that Christmas dinner, was that his father's business had been quietly bleeding money for years. Bad real estate bets. A lawsuit nobody talked about, debts stacked on top of debts. And that the family fund I had trusted with our savings was not growing at all. It was being used as collateral to keep his father's failing empire from collapsing in public. I found out by accident, the way you always find out the worst things. A document left open on a shared computer during a family visit. A loan agreement with my husband's name on it as a guarantor. A signature that looked suspiciously like mine that I never remembered giving. I did not scream. I did not confront anyone that night. Something in me went very still and very quiet instead. The kind of quiet that scares people more than shouting ever could. Though nobody around me noticed the shift because they had never really been looking at me closely enough to notice anything. Over the following months, I became a ghost with a mission. I requested copies of every document with my name on it, quietly through channels they did not think to monitor. Because they had never respected me enough to think I would push back. I consulted a lawyer on my lunch breaks, paid in cash, told no one. I traced the money. I discovered that the family fund had, months earlier, defaulted on a private debt held by an outside creditor. A debt that had then been quietly sold off in a routine transaction most people never notice happening. The kind of transaction that happens in finance every single day, boring, procedural, invisible. Except I was not most people anymore. I had spent 2 years rebuilding my accounting license in secret, working weekends. Studying while my husband thought I was catching up on shows in the other room. And I used every bit of that knowledge, every contact from my recertification program, to make sure that when that debt went up for purchase, I was the one who bought it. Quietly, legally. Completely. By December, I did not just know about the family's financial house of cards. I owned the single largest piece of debt holding that house together. The exact note that his father needed refinanced by January 1st, or the whole structure would collapse. So when his father raised his glass at that dinner table and made his little joke about marrying Lucky, I already knew that within 12 hours he was going to need my signature on a refinancing document. My signature, the waitress they had been laughing at for 6 years. And there was no version of that refinancing happening without my full and complete agreement. I let the dinner finish. I let them have their laughter, their wine, their smug, comfortable evening. Because I was not interested in ruining their Christmas with a scene. I was interested in something quieter and far more permanent. The next morning, my husband's father called an emergency family meeting. Panic in his voice for the first time in 6 years. Because his finance team had just informed him who now held his debt. I walked into that same dining room, still decorated with the same candles, wearing the same calm expression I had worn the night before. And I set the envelope down on the table in front of him. I did not raise my voice. I told him the debt was mine now. That the refinancing would not happen without terms I found acceptable. And that those terms began with an apology that was 6 years overdue. Not to satisfy my ego, but because I needed everyone in that room to understand that respect is not optional. And it is not something you get to withhold from someone just because you decided a long time ago that they were beneath you. His mother went pale. His father actually stood up and then sat back down. His hands shaking slightly around a coffee cup he was not drinking from. My husband looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. And honestly, he probably was. I laid out the terms plainly. The way I had learned to lay out numbers for clients who did not want to hear bad news dressed up in soft language. Fair terms, not cruel ones. I was not there to destroy anyone. Because I had learned something important during those quiet months of preparation. That real power does not need to humiliate anyone to prove itself. It simply needs to be undeniable. Within a few weeks, the refinancing was finalized on my terms. And something shifted permanently in that family's dynamic. The kind of shift that cannot be undone with a nice gesture or a belated birthday card. The comments stopped. The little jokes about diners and waitressing phases stopped. Not because they suddenly respected me out of the goodness of their hearts, but because they finally understood that disrespecting me came with a cost they could no longer afford. My husband and I are still working through what those 6 years revealed about our marriage. About the ways he let his family diminish me while telling himself it was harmless. And I will not pretend that conversation has been easy or fully resolved. Because real growth rarely wraps up as neatly as we want it to. But I am not the woman who quietly poured wine and swallowed insults anymore. I spent 6 years being underestimated by people who mistook my patience for weakness. And I used every single one of those years to build something they could not see coming. And when the moment came, I did not need to raise my voice. Because the truth is that dignity does not announce itself with shouting. It announces itself with preparation, with patience, and with the absolute refusal to let anyone convince you that your worth is up for negotiation. If there is one thing I would want another woman sitting quietly at her own uncomfortable family table to hear tonight, it is this: your silence is not the same thing as your surrender. And the people who laugh at you today are often the same people who will need you tomorrow. So build yourself into someone they cannot afford to underestimate. And never, ever let anyone convince you that being kind means being small. If you enjoyed my story, please like and subscribe.